I found the note wedged between two books. Room 7. Midnight. Knocked twice. I should have ignored it, but I went. And what I found wasn't just a stranger. It was everything I'd been craving. Before I continue with the rest of the story, kindly do me a little favor. Please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to comment your favorite part of the story below. I love reading your thoughts and reactions. They truly keep me going. Now, allow me to take a moment to appreciate you. Yes, you, Rainbow. Thank you for making us a 600-strong community. Each one of you is a pillar of strength, color, and courage. This journey wouldn't be possible without your love, your voice, and your presence. You are making the queer community proud, and I see every one of you. Your support is not just a number. It's a movement. It's light in the dark. It's love, loud and unashamed. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for standing with me. Thank you for being you. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone when I found it. Just the usual. A quiet hour after work, escaping the noise of life between familiar shelves. The old bookstore on Maple Street had a scent that felt like a lullaby. Dust, aged paper, and something warm and worn, like time itself had taken a deep breath and settled in. I wandered past poetry, my fingers grazing spines like searching for a pulse. Some were cracked open like confessions. Others stood firm, unread and unbothered. Then there it was, wedged tightly between letters to a young poet and a leather-bound edition of Wuthering Heights, a folded slip of cream-colored paper, soft and handled. I paused. It wasn't mine, but it didn't feel like a mistake either. It felt deliberate, like it had been left just for me. I unfolded it with the reverence of someone opening a secret. Just 5 words, scrawled in black ink. Room 7. Midnight. Knocked twice. No name. No hint of why. No promise. Just an invitation. Or a dare. I should have laughed. Tossed it in the bin and blamed it on some romantic teenager with a flair for drama. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at it like it was a question my body already knew the answer to. I slipped the note into my coat pocket. Even as my heart began its slow, traitorous thud, the rest of the evening passed in fragments. Dinner tasted like cardboard. The hours crawled. The clock ticked louder than it ever had before. And when the hands pointed to 11:57, I found myself standing in front of room 7 at the old Beacon Inn. I didn't ask how I knew where it was. Maybe I'd always known. Maybe some stories are written before we agree to tell them. The hallway was quiet. The kind of quiet that breathes against your neck. I lifted my hand. Knock, knock, and waited, heart pounding, breath shallow, the air around me thick with something unnamed. The door opened slowly. No words, just a shadow, tall and sure, filling the frame like a sentence waiting to be read aloud. I stepped inside, and just like that, the story began. The door closed behind me with the softest click. Inside, room 7 felt suspended in time. Lit only by a single lamp on the desk, its golden glow pooling like warm honey over the room. Shadows stretched across the wallpaper, curling like vines, like secrets. The air carried the faint scent of cedarwood and old parchment. He didn't speak, just looked at me, not in the hungry way I'd feared, nor the indifferent way I'd expected, but with something slower, something deeper, like he was reading me, not the way you read a headline, but the way you read a poem for the 3rd time, still unsure of how it makes you feel. He was taller than I imagined, if I'd even dared to imagine him, dressed in black, simple and clean, as if he belonged to the shadows he stepped from. His jaw was faintly stubbled, his eyes an unreadable shade. But it wasn't his looks that undid me. It was the stillness, the kind that dares you to break it. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask something, his name, maybe, or why I was there. But then he reached to the table beside him and lifted a book, leather-bound, no title. He held it out to me. I took it without a word. The cover was warm, like it had been waiting in his hands for a while. I marked a passage, he said, finally. His voice velvety low. Spoke like it belonged in a library lit by candlelight. I flipped it open. A red silk ribbon lay like a breath between the pages. My throat tightened. "You are made of midnight and wild longing," I read aloud. "I want to press my mouth to your silence and taste what you never say." Silence fell between us again, but it wasn't empty. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the way the lamplight danced in his eyes, close enough that I could smell something warm on his skin, like spiced ink and worn-out longing. I was still holding the book, though I no longer saw the words. His fingers brushed the underside of my wrist as he took it gently from me and set it down. "You came," he said simply. Not a question. A statement. I nodded barely. "Why?" The question hung in the air, but I didn't have an answer that made sense. So I told the truth. I think I wanted to know if it was real. He didn't smile, but something softened around his mouth. "So, did I?" He stepped back and gestured to the chair beside the desk. I sat, almost without thinking, while he poured tea into two mismatched cups. One chipped at the rim, the other painted with fading blue flowers. We drank quietly, the clock ticking somewhere behind us, and I could feel it then, the pull, not toward sex, not even toward touch, but toward presence, the rare kind, the kind that wraps around your ribs and holds you still, makes you listen, makes you feel, with every part of you you've forgotten how to use. And when I left that night, long past 1 a.m., he hadn't even touched me again, but I felt like I'd been seen. The kind of seeing that undresses your soul. The next evening, I returned. No note this time. No invitation. Just a hum beneath my skin and the memory of how he'd looked at me, as though I was something he'd found in a paragraph he couldn't stop rereading. Room 7. Midnight. Again. The door opened before I knocked. "You came back," he said. "You didn't say not to." He stepped aside. Silent approval in the tilt of his head, the way his eyes lingered on my mouth before dragging upward to meet mine. Inside, the room was the same, but not. The air carried music now, faint and instrumental, like something out of an old French film. On the desk, a fresh book, this one slimmer, unmarked. He handed it to me with quiet ceremony. "Tonight, you read from this," he said. I flipped through it. Pages filled with poems I didn't recognize. Sparse, sharp, written like skin stretched over bone. "What is it?" "My own writing," he said simply, sitting across from me. "I've never shared before." That made me still. "You're trusting me with this?" He nodded once. "Your voice makes the words breathe." I didn't know what to say to that. My heart tapped against my ribs, uncertain whether it was fear, flattery, or something far more dangerous. So I read, softly at first, letting the syllables unfurl from my mouth like smoke. He watched me, not hungrily, but intently, as though the meaning wasn't in the words themselves, but in the way I said them. One piece stopped me cold. He came in quiet, but lived like punctuation. A soft full stop at the end of a long ache. I swallowed, looked up. "You wrote this for someone?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, resting his hand on the edge of the desk, a breath away from mine. "I didn't," he said. "Not until now." The air folded in on itself. Dense, breathless. There were no fireworks, no cinematic lean-in, just stillness again. But it felt heavier this time, like a touch waiting to happen. He stood, walked behind me, and gently, with the barest pressure, let his fingers drift across my shoulder. Just once. I closed my eyes. The space between us was electric. He didn't press, didn't push. He just was there, near, warm. And then he whispered, right at the edge of my neck. "You read like someone who knows how to be felt." It wasn't a line. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a confession. And I felt like a hand sliding beneath a veil, delicate, reverent. That night, we didn't touch again. Didn't kiss. But when I lay in my bed later, alone and breathless, I realized something. He hadn't just written words for me. He'd written space inside me, and now he was living there. The days between visits felt stretched thin, like threadbare pages waiting to be turned. I caught myself tracing my fingers along my own skin, remembering the brush of his hand on my shoulder, the quiet weight of his presence behind me in that small room. It was like being touched without being touched. I was consumed by the idea of him, the unspoken promise simmering beneath the surface. So when I arrived at room 7 that night, my pulse was a slow drum in my ears. He was already there, leaning against a window sill, fingers stained with ink. I could see the small flecks of black caught beneath his nails, the way his hands moved with a careful kind of reverence, like he was afraid to damage the words he crafted. "You write a lot," I said, trying to sound casual. He smiled, a quick flash of something shy, almost vulnerable. "Not enough," he answered. He stepped forward and handed me a notebook. Its leather cover was worn soft, edges frayed like an old lover's touch. "Want to see what the words feel like before they become poems?" he asked. I nodded, curious despite myself. He opened the book and I peered inside. Pages filled with hurried scribbles, half-formed lines, margins crowded with thoughts and questions. "You write with your hands, but I write with mine," he said, holding out his ink-stained fingers. There was something intimate about the confession. I reached out, brushing my fingertips against his palm, smudged and warm. The touch sent a ripple through me. Not desire, exactly. Something softer, deeper. Like the first brush of a lover's breath, gentle but charged. "Show me," I whispered. He leaned closer and guided my hand, letting me trace the jagged strokes of his writing. The contact was small, but held 1,000 things. Trust, hesitation, and invitation. When our fingers finally parted, I felt as though I was still holding on to something, an invisible thread connecting me to him, to whatever this was becoming. He caught my gaze and smiled again. "Not just words," he said, voice low. "Feelings." I swallowed, feeling the warmth spreading from my fingertips down my arm. Tonight, the ink wasn't just on his fingers. It was on my skin, my heart. And I didn't want to wash it away. Room 7 felt like a different world now, one where time slowed, and every breath carried the weight of a secret just waiting to be shared. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting by the window with the city lights bleeding in like distant stars. He didn't stand to greet me, just lifted his gaze, the faintest smile playing at his lips. "Come," he said softly, patting the space beside him. I hesitated, then settled in close enough to feel the heat radiating from his side, to hear the subtle catch of his breath. We sat in silence at first, the kind that's comfortable and electric all at once. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slender envelope, sealed with a single wax stamp. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a poem, handwritten on delicate parchment, the ink still slightly wet. I read it aloud, voice trembling just a little. "In the quiet between heartbeats, I found your shadow." A whisper tracing the lines. I thought were mine alone. He watched me with eyes dark and steady, as if waiting to see how those words would touch me. I folded the paper carefully, my fingers trembling. "Do you want to hear what I think?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. I leaned in closer, my shoulder brushing his. "The shadows aren't mine," I said. "They're yours too." He exhaled, a sound full of something like relief. His hand found mine then, slow, deliberate, not a touch, exactly. More promise, a tether, and in that soft pressure, I felt everything I had been craving, without a single word spoken or a touch more than a whisper. The night stretched on, folded between us like a secret we'd just begun to share. That night, I arrived early, too eager to wait in the hallway, while my heartbeat stormed against my ribs. He was already there, the room softly illuminated by a flickering candle on the desk. The flame danced in his eyes as he looked up from the scattered pages before him. "Early," he said with a quiet smile. I smiled back, my nerves melting just a little. Thought I'd try to catch the moment before it slips away, I said. He gestured for me to sit beside him, close enough that our knees brushed. The brush sent a subtle spark through me, like the smallest thread of electricity winding through my skin. On the desk lay a manuscript, thick and wore at the edges, the pages crowded with his thoughts and revisions. He handed me a pencil, its tip sharpened and waiting. "Help me edit," he invited. "Your voice matters here." As I leaned in, the heat from his arm seeped into mine. The air between us thickened with unspoken words. Together, we traced the lines, crossing out, rewriting, reading aloud. Our voices mingled, rising and falling with the rhythm of the text. At one point, our hands met over a page, fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. We pulled back, shy smiles exchanged like whispered secrets. Time blurred. The manuscript became less important than the closeness. The way the world outside faded until only the two of us remained. When he finally closed the book, his gaze held mine steadily. "Thank you," he said softly, "for being here." For a moment, nothing else mattered but the space between us, the silent promise that something was beginning, fragile and beautiful. And when I left that night, my skin still tingled with the memory of his touch. I didn't know how long I had been standing outside room 7 that night, heart hammering like a frantic drumbeat. But when the door creaked open and he appeared with that same quiet smile, the world snapped into focus. "Come in," he said. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something warm and inviting. He closed the door behind me, the click echoing louder than I expected. He didn't say anything at first, just reached out to turn down the candlelight until the room was bathed in a soft, golden glow. We sat close, closer than ever. His fingers found mine, tracing slow circles on my palm. Every touch was electric, but tender, like he was learning the language of my skin. He leaned in and I felt his breath, soft, steady, against my cheek. "Do you trust me?" he whispered. I swallowed, nodding. His hand moved gently, sliding up my arm, fingers barely grazing my skin. It wasn't rushed. There was no urgency, only the exquisite torment of almost touching, of anticipation curling tight like smoke in my chest. He paused, eyes searching mine. And then, just as I thought the moment would shatter under its own weight, he pressed a feather-light kiss against my temple. Not a promise, not a demand, a question, a beginning. And as I closed my eyes, the space between us felt charged with everything we hadn't said, and everything we dared to imagine. That night, the world outside room 7 felt distant, as if the city's noise had been swallowed whole by the silence between us. He was waiting when I arrived, the candlelight casting shadows that danced across his face, soft and flickering like a secret told in whispers. He didn't ask me to sit. Instead, he held out his hand. No words, no expectations, just a quiet invitation. I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm, the steady strength beneath my fingers. We moved together to the window, where the night stretched endlessly, dark, infinite. He pulled me close, just enough for our bodies to brush, light, teasing contact that sent a thrill weaving through my veins. We didn't speak. Why break the spell? Instead, he traced slow, lazy circles on my back, the gentlest touch, like a lover who knows how to build a moment without rushing it. I let my head rest against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that somehow mirrored my own. For a while, time stopped. There was only us, the quiet, the promise of what might come next. And in that suspended moment, I knew this was more than desire. It was something raw, vulnerable, something worth waiting for. The clock in room 7 ticked steadily, but time felt like it had melted away. We were close, closer than ever before, but neither of us rushed the moment. His fingers found mine again, weaving our hands together with a quiet certainty. "I wanted this," he murmured, voice low and thick with emotion, "since the moment you knocked on that door." I smiled, feeling the weight of all the nights, all the poems, all the silences that had brought us here. He pulled me gently to sit beside him on the worn leather chair, our bodies pressing together in the soft candlelight. His hand traced a slow path along my jaw, thumb brushing my lips. I leaned in, eyes fluttering closed. Our breaths mingled, the steady inhale and exhale that said everything words couldn't. There was no hurry, no frantic need, just a pure, electric hum of connection. He pressed a soft kiss to my forehead, then another at the corner of my mouth. The kind of kiss that promises patience, tenderness, and something lasting. We stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms, heartbeats sinking between the pages of our shared story. And as the night deepened, so did the feeling that this was exactly where we were meant to be. Not just a moment of desire, but beginning written softly, intimately, hard between the pages.